Jack, thousands of people have died in this storm. He said, well, let me Google it, Oh, he said,
what if everything you thought about living free, off the land, off the grid, on your own terms, wasn't just a lifestyle, but a threat to the system? This is the story of a man who built an entire village with his bare hands, only to be dragged into court for it. A modern-day mountain sage, caught between ancient wisdom and modern law. You might wonder why a man would vanish in the woods at 17, but what he found there became a whole world. That's a subtle mystery at the very start. Eustace Conway stepped into the forest and never quite stepped out. Stay with me, because what happened next is the kind of story that rewrites everything. He didn't just camp. He built an entire universe among the pines. For over 3 decades, Eustace lived off the grid on 1,000 secluded acres near Boone, North Carolina, what he calls Turtle Island. Most people can't last a night under the stars, but he thrived there. Hooks into curiosity. What fuels someone to trade modern life for pure wilderness? We'll see. Raised in Columbia, South Carolina, amid 3 siblings and parents who were educators, Eustace seemed destined for convention. Yet at 17, driven by something deeper, he picked up a rifle, pitched a teepee, and walked straight into the unknown. He hiked the full length of the Appalachian Trail, and in 1998, radio icon Ira Glass dedicated an episode of This American Life, titled Adventures in the Simple Life, to follow him as he crossed the entire U.S. on horseback, from the Atlantic Ocean's edge to the Pacific, in 103 days. That trek drew attention and skepticism. People started comparing him to Bud and Temple Abernathy, 2 boys who rode coast to coast in 1911, ages 11 and 7. Their unbelievable journey, spanning over 3,600 miles in 62 days without phones or adult guardians, became folklore. So when Eustace repeated the feat, questions followed. Hook, what drives someone to prove themselves against legends? But Eustace never performed for the world. He followed a deeper calling, to live on his own terms. Syracuse University wildlife artist Sally Middleton once told him, "You are the most interesting man I have ever met." That quote cuts through the noise. He wasn't playing mountain myth. He was living it. Call it naturalist, call it survivalist. But to him, freedom meant waking with the sun, growing his own food, crafting shelter with his hands, and teaching others to do the same. Along the way, he faced moments that put him on the edge. Once he split his thumb wide open. No doctors, no sterile rooms, just him, plant-based treatment, and 12 stitches. It nearly ended there, but he sewed it himself. That moment became a legend among campers. He didn't just survive in the woods. He mastered its lessons. In 1987, after studying anthropology and English at Appalachian State University, where he was honored as the most outstanding senior, Eustace purchased the first parcel of Turtle Island, sacred to him. It felt right the moment he saw it. Over time, he added more land, built a 9-structure farmstead using only resources found on site, and invited interns and learners to join. No screens, no handouts, just fire making with friction, bark weaving, nettle soups, and silent lessons under sky. Then came the show that changed everything. On May 31st, 2012, Mountain Men premiered on the History Channel. The camera crews arrived to capture Eustace living off-grid in the Blue Ridge Mountains. We watched him stock firewood, train draft horses, and build log cabins, all by hand. Horses can have babies, but cars can't, he once quipped on camera. That line stuck. But the show also introduced viewers to others. Tom in Montana, hunting through Rocky Mountain winters, and Marty in Alaska, isolating himself from wife and daughter in a frozen cabin. Watching Eustace go about his days felt comforting, like getting an invitation to an alternate life. But there was trouble brewing behind the logs. Around 2012 and 2013, the county inspection crew arrived. Turtle Island, beloved by many, was deemed non-compliant with health and building codes. On June 27, 2013, under sweltering summer heat, local officials cited safety violations and shut down the preserve. Eustace lay sprawled on a wooden sled near the horse barn, stunned. All that work, the buildings, trails, programs, held in the balance of regulations. Hook, how could someone live so far from modern luxury, yet be undone by permits? Support rolled in. College students, faculty, even Appalachian State groups rallied behind him, protesting to the county health department. They carried signs like private property, private discretion. But even as allies gathered, Eustace pointed to a disturbed tension. Modern institutions clashing with ancestral ways. He stood firm. Over the years, Eustace reinvented how Turtle Island worked. He shifted leadership to a nonprofit board and focused on camps and workshops. Today, families gather in summer for screen-free experiences. They learn blacksmithing, hide tanning, basket weaving, all taught with stories and sweat. Upcoming workshops, like the Forest of Lumber to Completion series in October 2025, draw participants eager to build cabins from scratch. Hook, why are so many returning to these old skills in 2025? But here's another twist. In late 2024 and early 2025, Eustace stepped into controversy. After Tropical Storm Helene battered North Carolina, he claimed local officials were hiding the true death toll. Piles of bodies, he said, including refrigerator trucks full of them. Those claims were widely debunked by the North Carolina Department of Health and confirmed false by Carolina Public Press, which reported just over 100 storm-related fatalities, far from the dramatic numbers he alleged. Hook, what happens when a man who trusted nature clashes with institutional trust? He remains an outsider, no longer starring on Mountain Men since mid-2023, but still leading Turtle Island through community-based programs. His Instagram shows him preparing fall workshops in June 2025, while summer camps fill up. The preserve thrives as a living classroom, offering hands-on experiences and wild reconnection. Still, that tension lingers, a man guided by ancestral rhythms, friction-making peace, learning from splintered timber, yet beset by modern regulations and public controversy. It begs the question, can one truly live outside the system when the system reaches in? So we start here, with a growing legend, a covert shutdown, a media spark, and a man shaped by nature and conflict. We'll lean into the tension next time. Part 2 will unpack how Conway weathered the storm, both literal and figurative, and what lies ahead for Turtle Island and the man behind it. But right now, ask yourself, what would it take for you to walk away from everything and build your dream stick by stick? He always felt that strange tug. On one side, TV's bright lights fueling Turtle Island's mission, and on the other, a deep mistrust of anything institutional. That tension started the moment Mountain Men debuted. It breathed life into Turtle Island, filling internships, enriching programs, and bringing steady income, but also invited scrutiny nobody expected. What happens when exposure becomes a catalyst for collapse? That's exactly when the first cracks appeared. Someone filed a tip to Watauga County, and soon inspectors arrived. They found dozens of structures, cabins, workshops, bathrooms, all built without any permits. No codes followed, no papers filed. The county gave him 3 impossible choices: retrofit every building, pay for retroactive inspections, or tear everything down. None of it felt like an option. The land he poured his life into was suddenly entangled in red tape, and his dream teetered on the edge. Flashback to summer 2012, when Joe Furman, the county planning director, received a mysterious envelope. Maps, photos, wiring plans. It detailed every creaky floorboard and solar inverter on Turtle Island. That sparked the first real pressure. People had assumed Eustace lived miles from civilization. The truth: Turtle Island sits right outside Boone, a town of around 17,000 students and families, with smooth roads and modern homes just minutes away. On a sunny day, you can hear cars on the Blue Ridge Parkway. But one turn down that gravel lane, past the stream, and the world shifts. You enter a field ringed by a handmade blacksmith forge, hand-split log cabins, a rustic kitchen, and a barn with shingles shaped by hand. It feels timeless until the rules of the modern world show up. Hook, why would a place that teaches ancestral skills get shut down for teaching them? Inspectors showed up again in September 2012 with deputies and a warrant. They documented buildings with no water, no sewer lines, ungraded lumber, jury-rigged wiring, chimneys vented wrong, cabins that weren't even bolted to foundations, and outhouses nobody approved. Their report spanned 78 pages, declaring structures unsafe and visitors in danger. They demanded everyone leave, a dramatic gamble for a place built on trust and hands-on learning. Eustace didn't comply. Instead, he looked at those handmade cabins. His hands had raised them, and he spoke up. He argued that survival isn't taught in air-conditioned rooms or codebook structures. It's learned when you sweat, when you build bark baskets, when you cook over open flame. People have been building shelter for thousands of years, he said. How can I not on my own land, with my own trees, without being handed a list of codes? It feels like denying a human right. To challenge the county's claims, he posted videos online featuring Drew Kelly, a certified building inspector. Kelly said many of the buildings exceeded minimum standards, just not modern ones. They were functional, purposeful, not flash-built homes. Eustace couldn't shake the timing. No trouble before mountain men, and suddenly rules and citations flooded in. Hook. Did visibility and compliance fears trigger this? TV, which fueled national fascination, quickly morphed into a backdrop for confrontation. On screen, he's standing up to government. The second episode, titled Ma'am, featured him opening an envelope-marked motion to claim exempt property, which threatened his land. Basically, I just got a message saying, "Your life is over," he read aloud, knife in hand. The show framed it as a struggle of man versus system, but reality was more personal. Every piece carried weight. This wasn't just a lawsuit, it was a reckoning. For months, Eustace and his small crew worked like their lives depended on it. Splitting wood, selling fence rails, taking apprentices out horses, doing grunt work to keep Turtle Island solvent. In the season finale, this is the end, he and a friend rode horseback into Boone, heading toward the courthouse. It felt like his last stand, but would it be enough? Meeting at the courthouse felt cinematic, but years earlier, another event had already shaken Turtle Island's foundations. Hook, a hidden secret from the past that would come back to haunt him. In August 2005, Kimberly Baker arrived for a teacher retreat. During a sling rock demo, a projectile struck her, blinding her right eye. The result, a cascade of legal battles. 2 staff settled for $400,000, and in 2009 Eustace agreed to pay $75,000, backing it with land as collateral. But when the deadline passed, she filed again. It dragged on until April 2012, just as Mountain Men began filming. That legal drama wasn't publicized on TV. The History Channel's contract forbid him from contesting the portrayal. But in interviews like the one he did with Elizabeth Gilbert, he admitted he performed a bit of the wild man image, because that's what people expected. He described it as mostly an act, meant to capture viewers and elevate his message. That tension between authenticity and persona was real, and it underpinned everything. Once the legal twists were out, backlash came fast. County offices were swamped with letters. Some were civil, others extreme. On a conservative forum, someone wrote that what was happening to Eustace felt like Nazi Germany. They asked, "Are officials upset someone can survive without them?" Suddenly, his fight was about more than land. It was about freedom and traditional ways under siege. Hook. How far will one man go to protect an ideal? State Senator Dan Soucek showed up, declaring Eustace's case of property rights issue. He noted that for 26 years, not one child or visitor had been harmed. Soucek proposed a legislative exemption for places like Turtle Island, primitive structures, historical shelters. That visit felt like a potential turning point. Could policy bend to accommodate archives of ancestral living? Yet the road ahead remained steep. Eustace hired engineers, attorneys, and structural experts to appeal code infractions. He entered meetings with the NC Building Code Council, seeking exemptions for educational purposes. Supporters rallied with petitions, nearly 10,000 signatures calling for cultural preservation over conformity, and he stood firm. "Would you go to jail for this?" someone asked. "I would be willing to die for this," he replied. The chapter ends with Turtle Island caught between worlds, ancient rhythms and modern regulation. He built a living classroom of clay, stone, and muscle. Now he's battling bureaucracy, lawsuits, and media portrayal. But one question looms. Can ancestral ways endure when the system demands conformity? The moment Turtle Island pulsed back to life wasn't just symbolic. It was pure defiance. In June 2013, North Carolina's Republican-led legislature passed a bill shielding primitive farms and camps like Turtle Island from modern building codes. Governor Pat McCrory signed on June 12th, and suddenly, the structures once labeled unsafe were again legal. Not long after, Eustace stood under the great barn's rafted ceiling, surrounded by interns and campers, with smoke and earthy scents swirling through the air. He explained the centuries-old punch mortise technique that shaped those hand-split floorboards, an antique craft flagged by inspectors as dangerous. Hook. Could ancient methods reclaim their place in a modern world? He didn't miss a beat. He leaned into the audience and said quietly but firmly, "This way of living, this way of building, matters because it's inherent in us." He argued that the real danger wasn't the buildings. It was a corporate-driven mindset that wants every structure sanitized. "Teach it, pass it on," he said, "because you owe it to the future." That moment rippled beyond Turtle Island. His local fame had ballooned into regional renown. In Nick Rosen's off-grid book, the Turtle Island conflict was framed as part of a nationwide pushback against those choosing to live on their own terms. But not everyone agreed. A contractor from Boone, Douglas McGuire, acknowledged the value of self-reliance, but felt this issue was about safety, not freedom. Hook. Was this a cultural clash or a community concern? Christian Cultrader, once an apprentice turned sustainable energy engineer, saw a third angle. He believed Eustace's appearance on Mountain Men came partly from ego and partly from earnest educational ambition. Eustace had told him that the true dream wasn't Turtle Island itself. It was inspiring campers to build their own versions. Most didn't, but some did. That ripple matters. Then came the heartbreak that shook everything. Eustace drafted a public tribute to Preston Roberts, his closest friend and co-founder, after he passed unexpectedly from a fast-moving liver tumor at age 60. Hook. How do you carry on when your guiding light fades? Eustace poured raw emotion into his words, describing Preston's unwavering kindness, his love for family, his generosity. He reminded the world of the time Preston donned a pink tutu in the cold to cheer Kathleen during her illness, a testament to his depth. A GoFundMe was set up, repair funds were allocated for Preston's leaking roof, and donations poured in. The grief was palpable. Turtle Island lost not just a co-teacher, but a heartbeat, someone who shaped the land and the lives on it. Preston's passing created a tangible void. Eustace described it as a chasm. That word lingered. Preston had embodied ancient constancy. The woods never changed, he used to say. But now, that voice was silent. His grave rests near the old medicine wheel on Morning Watch Hill, a simple stone under towering pines. Visitors still leave carved pebbles and feathers there, and legends say the forest hushes when someone stands at his grave. That place became sacred ground, a daily reminder that stewardship extends beyond life. At Preston's celebration of life, alumni and strangers gathered, voices choked yet hopeful, stories shared around campfires. They laughed, they cried, and they honored a man who taught by example and whose presence made others feel brave just by standing next to him. For fans of Mountain Men, it marked more than an era's end. It symbolized a shift. This wasn't about survival skills anymore, but about legacy, grief, and resilience. With Preston gone and legal battles behind him, Eustace faced a larger question. How much more could Turtle Island and he himself shoulder? He had fought bureaucracy, lawsuits, and public doubts. He'd lost his closest ally, and he was stepping into a future shaped by internal debate about authoring ancestral living in a regulatory society. He stood at a crossroads, the mountain man, stripped of a brother-in-arms and caught between ancient rhythms and modern scrutiny. Hook. How do you rebuild when your foundation has crumbled? Then came the celebrity-style financial and lifestyle breakdown. Eustace Conway, long known for his barefoot backwoods stance, has quietly curated a modest yet strategic portfolio. He owns a late-model Ford F-150, not flashy but reliable, and tends toward practical accessories rather than luxury watches, though his vintage Casio G-Shock is a nod to simplicity and resilience. His real estate holdings center on Turtle Island's 1,000 acres near Boone. He occasionally charters small private planes to reach speaking engagements and workshops across the Southeast. Partnerships with outdoor brands and academic institutions bring in modest revenue through gear and educational program sponsorships. He carries standard health and land insurance. Nothing ostentatious, but appropriate for a man insulating himself against wild and bureaucratic forces. He's invested in the preserve's nonprofit structure, steering funds into campground improvements rather than flashy assets. The lesson? Wealth doesn't always mean opulence. It can mean aligning assets with purpose, durability over flash, and legacy over lifestyle. Hook. Maybe the richest life is measured not in luxury, but in value sustained across generations. He's not the headline star of a reality show anymore, but his influence remains rooted in real transformation. He once traded buckskin for jeans, eschewed gadgets for hand tools, stepped into courtrooms when cameras showed up, and now stands in the silent woods, processing loss and planning for continuity. Turtle Island endures as a living classroom. Its trails echoing laughter, its cabins humming with the craft of basketry and timber framing, its barn once again resonant with hammers and fire-making. The preserve is less about proving a point and more about offering a corridor to ancestral understanding. The fight has shifted from structures to stories. The final shot pans over Turtle Island at dusk, a golden light brushing handmade shingles and whispering through cornstalks. Eustace stands alone, gazing toward the ridges that cradle the valley. Behind him lies love, grief, conflict, victory, and an unfinished promise to the next generation. The camera lingers on his profile, the mountain man, teacher, friend, survivor. Now the question echoes out beyond the ridge, when systems shift, when loss visits hardest, when the cameras fade. What remains? That's the question Eustace still lives with, and the one we leave you with, because healing is quieter than drama, and legacy isn't built on contention. It's rooted in the soil beneath our feet. If this story stirred something in you, nostalgia, wonder, maybe a bit of restlessness, hit that like button, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more stories like this.